بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, I testify that there is no true God worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is Allah's true slave and messenger. May Allah's salah and salam be upon the noble Prophet, his household and the noble companions, and those who follow on their path until the day of resurrection. We continue in this third class the explanation of the three fundamental principles of Islam, and we covered the first matter which the author rahimahullah addressed from the four matters that the Muslim should abide with to learn, and that the first one was al-ilm, knowledge, knowing of Allah, His Prophet, and knowing the deen of Islam with evidences. And the evidences are of course from the Kitabullah, from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the Sunnah, or the consensus of the Muslim Ummah. The second matter that is obligatory to learn is, or to know, is al-amalu bihi. He said al-amalu bihi, meaning action upon that, action upon the knowledge which he described earlier. Meaning to act in accordance with the knowledge acquired, because knowledge is sought only so that action can be correct and based on evidence and proof, and also so that the knowledge can be transformed into a real behavior, a real manifestation of the evidences pertaining to the knowledge of the book or the Sunnah, or through the consensus which the author spoke about earlier. Many are the textual proofs obligating actions following knowledge, and there are explicit threats for those who don't act according to the knowledge they acquire and learn, and for the person who specifically does not start to correct himself before trying to correct others. And from the statements of the Salaf in this respect is the saying of Al-Fudayl bin Ayad rahimahullah ta'ala, that the scholar continues to be ignorant until he acts in accordance with his knowledge. If he does so, then he really becomes a scholar. This is such because if he has knowledge and does not act accordingly, then he is ignorant, because there is really no difference between him and the ignorant one, and thus the alim, the scholar, can be truly a scholar when he acts upon the knowledge he knows. Not only that, action has other benefits as well. In addition to the fact that it is a proof and plea for the person, it is also from the means of establishment of the ilm, of the knowledge itself, and of its continuity. That's why you see the person who acts in accordance with his knowledge remembers the masail, the cases, and the rulings and the evidences. As to the one who doesn't, he loses that quickly. In fact, some of the righteous predecessors rahimahumullah said, كنا نستعين على حفظ الحديث بالعمل به. كنا نستعين على حفظ الحديث بالعمل به. We used to utilize acting upon the hadith as a means to preserve it. Add to this what has been said by some of the people of knowledge, that the one who acts by what he knows, Allah will make him inherit knowledge which he did not know of. And to the one who does not act in accordance with the knowledge he has, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is about to deprive him of what he knows. Some people say this statement and they consider it to be a hadith, and this is incorrect. This is a famous statement. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah mentioned it. As to the meaning, Allah will make him inherit that which he does not know, meaning Allah will increase his faith and will lighten his insight and will open for him variety of knowledge. And that's why the alim who acts in accordance with his knowledge, you see him in growth all the time. And not only that, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also blesses his time and blesses his knowledge. And the evidence for this is in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. قال الله تعالى in Surah Muhammad chapter 47 verse 17, والذين اهتدوا زادهم هدى وآتاهم تقواهم. While as for those who accept guidance, He increases their guidance and bestows on them their piety. Al-Imam al-Shawkani rahimahullah said, Allah increases their iman, their faith and their knowledge, and give them good knowledge regarding the deen. Meaning those who were guided to the way of good, believing in Allah and acting in accordance with His commands, Allah will increase their knowledge and they increase their iman and faith and give them insight into the deen and correct understanding of the deen. And therefore the Muslim should realize the importance of the matter of acting according to his knowledge, remembering the fact that if the person does not do so, then his knowledge will be a testimony against him, as in the hadith of Abi Barza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تزول قدم عبد يوم القيامة حتى يسأل عن أربع ومنها وعن علمه ماذا عمل فيه. That on the day of resurrection, a person will not move from his place until he is asked about 4 matters, and from them is about his knowledge that he acquired, whether he acted on it, or what did he do regarding it. Did he act upon it? That's the meaning. And this is not particular to the scholars. And this hadith, by the way, is reported by Tirmidhi, and he said hadithun sahih, a correct hadith, and also Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah authenticated it. And this is not particular to the scholars, as some people may understand. Rather, everyone who knows a particular matter of the matters of knowledge, then the evidence is established upon him regarding this matter. And therefore, if a person hears a point of benefit in a lecture, or during a sermon on a Friday, for example, warning against a certain sin or some sins, while he is indulged in them or in one of them, and then he comes to know that this is a sin and it is forbidden, then this is knowledge. Then he now has knowledge about it, and thus the evidence is established that he heard this knowledge. And it is affirmed in the hadith of Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiyallahu ta'ala anhu that the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, وَالْقُرْآنُ حُجَّةٌ لَكَ أَوْ عَلَيْكَ, and the Quran is an evidence for you or against you. Then the author, when he said action upon that knowledge, meaning in accordance with what this knowledge entails from belief in Allah and regarding the correct belief of the heart, the speech of the tongue, and the action of the body parts. Also establishing the obedience to Allah by complying with His commands and abstaining from His prohibitions. Referring to the particular acts of worship and also to the acts of worship which benefit others, transcends the person himself to the community. Like the particular worships like those of Salah and fasting and Hajj, etc. And the worships that transcend and affects the community, like enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong, and the jihad in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the like. And as our Shaykh rahimahullah mentioned, al-amalu fil haqiqa huwa thamaratul ilm. Actions in reality represent the fruit of knowledge. Then he said, فَمَنْ عَمِلَ بِلَا عِلْمٍ فَقَدْ شَابَهَ النَّصَارَى وَمَنْ عَلِمَ وَلَمْ يَعْمَلْ فَقَدْ شَابَهَ الْيَهُودِ. Meaning, anyone who acts without knowledge, then indeed he has he resembles the Christians, because this is the case with the Christians. They act without knowledge, and this is very evident and known and seen. And also with respect to the other side, وَمَنْ عَلِمَ وَلَمْ يَعْمَلْ فَقَدْ شَابَهَ الْيَهُودِ. And whoever knows but does not act in according with the knowledge he attained, then indeed he resembles the Jews, because this is the situation with the Jews. They knew the truth, but they didn't act accordingly. Furthermore, we go to the third matter which the author rahimahullah mentioned. So first of all he mentioned al-ilm, second acting according to the ilm, to the knowledge, and the third calling to that meaning calling to that brought by the messenger, the revelation which Allah gave to the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this prescribed way laid down by Allah and which the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought to mankind. Ad-da'watu ilayh, calling to that. So the da'wah is da'wah to tawheed and obedience, and this is the task of the messengers and their followers. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Yusuf chapter 12 verse 108, قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن اتبعني. Say, Muhammad, this is my way, inviting to Allah, meaning to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to tawheed, and that all worship should be made purely for Allah, with sure knowledge. I and whoever follows me also must invite others to Allah, to tawheed, upon certain and sure knowledge. This is the basira. And the da'wah to Allah based on the basira is the successful one, which produces the anticipated fruits by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when coupled with sincerity. It is such because man, if he perfects his knowledge and his action accordingly, then he must exert the good to others in accordance with the objective laid down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to his messengers, inviting people to tawheed. This is the great good that the person can do to himself and to others. The reward to Allah is a great matter, and there is abundant reward for that. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith addressing Ali bin Abi Talib, فَوَاللَّهِ لَأَنْ يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا, by Allah, if Allah guides on your hands a single person, خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمْرِ النَّعَمِ, then this is better for you than the red camels, and this is the most precious known to the Arabs then. And the da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot bring these fruits and cannot be a means for correction unless the da'iyah to Allah is qualified with certain qualities and characteristics which will help in dissipating the da'wah and accepting it. From this, sincerity, first of all, intending the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his pleasure, and to be good to the people, and he should be careful not to call people for himself and intend to make himself distinguished above others and humiliate the one being called by making him feel that he is ignorant, and so forth. And he should have also fear, taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, complying with the commands and abstaining from the prohibitions, and adorned with the characteristics of Ahlul Iman, the people of faith, himself being an example. And he should also have this sure knowledge, knowing what he is calling for, knowing the condition of the one being called, and with wisdom also should be clement and have self-control even at the times of anger, because the field for da'wah is the field of da'wah lies in the chests of people and themselves, and these are different amongst people and distinguished amongst them, different like the difference of their shapes and forms. Also, the caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should exert the effort to start with the most important, going to the lesser, in accordance with the environment he is addressing. So the matters of Aqidah and the fundamentals of the deen should come in the first rank and the first priority. And this came, as you all know, in the hadith of Muaz, when the Prophet ﷺ sent Muaz bin Jabal to Al-Yaman. He told him, فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلَ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ شَهَادَةُ أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. He told him, let the first thing أول ما تدعوهم فليكن أول ما تدعوهم إليه, the first thing you call them to is testimony, the testimony of faith that there is no true God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Muhammad is his messenger, to the end of the hadith, and which we have discussed in the other room when we were discussing the beneficial saying on the book of Tawheed. Not only that, the caller to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should take the approach laid down in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah An-Nahl chapter 16 verse 125. قال الله تعالى ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Call to the way prescribed by your Lord Allah with wisdom, and the wisdom is that which is in the book and the sunnah and the authentic sunnah, and with fine admonition, fair preaching, and debate with them, argue with them in a way that is better, in the best manner. The hikmah is only attained through the understanding of the Quran and the understanding of the Sharia, because this would mean knowing the truth and acting accordingly and being on the right track in sayings and in actions, knowing as well the reality of faith and the true teachings of Islam. And what about al-maw'idha al-hasana, the fair preaching, commanding what is right and forbidding what is wrong, in a balanced approach between giving glad tidings and between also threats, meaning relating the threats that came in the Sharia concerning the consequences when people turn away from the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and concerning what is unlawful being practiced, and also having good approach. And the good approach is the just one, and also trying to incite the one being called to abandon in a good way, to abandon the wrong or the sin the person is committing. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says here, وَجَادِلْهُمْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ, and argue not with them except in a way that is good, in the best way, the best way that may produce the best results. Like, for example, sticking to the subject and to the objective of the subject, and keeping away from reactions and counter reactions, and keeping away from demean matters, and leaving that of a lesser of importance to that which is of a higher importance, in order to preserve time and also to keep self-dignity and morality. So this da'wah to Allah, as you can see, requires knowledge in the Sharia, so that it becomes it is given in accordance with basira, with sure knowledge. And we said this knowledge refers to knowing the al-hukm al-shar'i, the decree, the legal decree, and the way of conveying the matters, and the condition of the one being addressed, how the call is to be made to him. As to the fields of da'wah, then there are many. One can take, for example, the approach of giving speeches and lectures, or through articles, writing articles, or through halaqat al-ilm, circles of knowledge, writing books, clarifying, refuting misconceptions, calling to Allah in gatherings established for particular purposes, for example, such that if a person sits in such circles, then this will be an opportunity for him to give da'wah, but it should be in such a way that it will not be boring or irritating to the people. And this, as our Shaykh rahimahullah now is explaining, that the da'iyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may present something in the circle, in the gathering, so that to stimulate the discussion, to stimulate the discussion. And it is known that discussions and questions and answers are of a great benefit in understanding what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. And it could be even more effective than giving uninterrupted speeches or lectures. As we mentioned earlier, the da'wah to Allah is the task of the messengers, and it's the way of those who followed the messengers on goodness. Because if the person knows the one whom he has to worship and deserves the worship, and knows his prophet and his deen, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows upon him from his favors, favored him with that and guided him to it, then in this case he moves to help his brothers and sisters, to call them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give them the glad tidings. We know of the hadith which we mentioned earlier, the hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, when he sent Ali bin Abi Talib on the day of Khaybar. He told him, proceed without hurrying, انفذ على رسلك حتى تنزل بساحتهم على رسلك حتى تنزل بساحتهم, proceed with ease, without hurrying, until you reach their territory. Then call them to Islam, ثم ادعهم إلى الإسلام وأخبرهم بما يجب عليهم من حق الله, and let them know what's binding upon them from the rights of Allah upon them. فوالله لأن يهدي الله بك رجلا واحدا خير لك من حمر النعم. By Allah, it is better for you that Allah should guide a single man through you than red camels. And this is in Sahih Bukhari. And also in the hadith reported by Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ said, من دعا إلى هدى كان له من الأجر مثل أجور من تبعه لا ينقص ذلك من أجورهم شيئا. Whoever calls to guidance, then there is for him a reward like the rewards of those who follow him. ومن دعا إلى ضلالة كان عليه من الإثم مثل آثام من تبعه لا ينقص ذلك من آثامهم شيئا. And whoever calls to misguidance will have sin upon him like the sins of those who follow him, and that will reduce nothing from their sins. And in the narration also by Imam Muslim rahimahullah, من دل على خير فله مثل أجر فاعله. Whoever guides to some good deed, then he receives a reward like that of its doer. Like that of its doer. These are some of the characteristics of calling people to Allah in terms of what is to be called for and the conditions of the caller and the means of calling. Then the author rahimahullah mentions the four important matters, and that is as-sabru ala al-adha fi, patiently persevering and bearing any harm encountered upon that way. The way of knowledge, the way of acting upon the knowledge, and the da'wah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All of this requires patient perseverance. This last matter, the issue of patience and bearing any harm encountered upon that way, will be discussed inshallah in the class number 4. We have just now finished class number 3. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this from me and to make it sincere for His face, and I ask Him to make it a benefit for myself and for all of you. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك ربي وأتوب إليك.